Good evening, everyone. Hope all of you are doing well today. Negative emotions like fear, sadness, and anger are a basic part of life. And sometimes we struggle with how to deal with these effectively. It can be tempting to act on what you're feeling right away, but that often doesn't fix the situation that caused the emotion. In fact, it may lead to more problems to deal with down the road. Joining us today, we have Sister Sona. Sister Sona has been living in Abu Dhabi since 2008 and currently holds the position of Director of Inner Space Center and is also responsible for the day to day management of Inner Space Center affairs. She has been practicing and teaching meditation since 28 years. Sister Sona has delivered workshops and seminars on different topics. So let us all welcome her today. Good afternoon, Sister Sona.
Good afternoon, Jabin, and thank you so much for your sweet welcome and for having me in Indonesia with you. It's
Thank
amazing
you
how
for
we
joining
travel.
us today.
It's wonderful how we travel the world, isn't it? From Abu Dhabi all the way to Jakarta and other parts of Indonesia, I'm sure. So, today we are looking at a topic which I think is so relevant in the world, isn't it? This whole issue about emotions, because our emotions this year have certainly taken a hit. It's been a very roller coaster year, both from the external point of view, what's happened in the world, which means obviously internally as well. We have been facing a lot of upheaval. I think for most people, it's been what we would call a difficult year. Would that be right? So I think I'd like to start off by asking those who are on the call, the participants, what is an emotion? So important to know, how do we define emotion? And I know for me, emotion is just like a very strong feeling. To be very, very simple about it, it's a strong feeling that arises. And, many times the feeling can't even be tracked back. You sort of go, where did that come from? Or, you act impulsively or you feel impulsively. And then at some point in time, the emotion dies down and then you do all the post mortem. You know, And I think we all know that come out with a good outcome. So at the moment, I think the way I would see it is there's often a stimulus out there in the world. Something happens, someone says something, and then what? Suddenly, Is it okay? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, sister, I think there has been a little, the voice was breaking. It was not clear. If you could repeat again.
Sure. Okay, so what I was saying is often there is a stimulus outside, and then that's like
Sister Sona?
outside. Yes.
Yes, I think we are having a problem with the internet connection. So your voice is breaking up.
Oh,
It's
really?
not
Okay.
audible.
Um, that's strange. Okay, so shall I try from my iPhone? I can just do exactly the same link. It just won't look as beautiful, but that's okay. And we'll
Okay, let's try this now. Yeah.
Okay, so I will leave the previous thing and here we go.
Yeah, this is better.
Is this okay? So yeah, whichever works best, I guess. All right.
Thank you.
That's okay. So just back to the whole story. We try to justify how I'm feeling by saying you made me feel this way. The situation made me feel this way. Yeah. Is that true? I mean, come on, you're all very, very spiritual people and you know how the world works now. So is it true, really? Someone made me feel this way? You know, if that were true, it would mean that you've given the remote control of your thinking and your feeling to someone, to something, basically to the world outside. Is that true? Is it really true that that person made you feel angry? Or, if we want to be really honest, could we say that that person was the trigger and they stimulated something in me and that came out as the emotion? Yeah. It's a really hard pill to swallow. It's a hard fact, but it is what it is. So usually something out there hits something within me, starts off a thought process, and then, of course, you know, from the thought comes the feeling, the emotion, the roller coaster. From there, develop my attitudes in life. And then from there, all the memories, all the experiences of the past, all the pain that I have stored, you know, all the stuff that's sitting inside. And an interesting thing that I've found personally is that, you know, it's not even that the stimulus comes in and triggers my mind. That's what we often think happens, you know? So it's the mind that creates the thoughts. In fact, no, the stimulus doesn't trigger my mind. The stimulus comes in and triggers my subconscious mind. This is where it gets very, very, very tricky. So the subconscious mind is where all my memories of the past are. And because my memories are all there in the past, the stimulus actually hits deep, 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 deep down inside. And it starts to kind of awaken something in the past that has not been healed, something in the past that has not been put to bed, that has not been resolved. And that is where the danger lies. So, whenever we talk about emotional management, people think that we're looking at something very superficial, you know? So, I have the emotion of anger. So, I should be peaceful. So, when that person says something, I keep saying to myself, I'm peaceful, I'm peaceful, I'm peaceful. It's a very good temporary band aid, but that's all it is. It's just a band aid. And why do I say that? Because as long as the trigger is within my comfort zone, the stimulus is within my comfort zone, I can manage it. But when something unexpected happens and my defense mechanism is not there, I end up then not knowing how deep this arrow is going to go inside me and what it's going to start up again. So, real emotional management is not just about managing the day-to-day feelings that I've had in the recent past. It really is about me reflecting deeply and trying to find out in this reflection with myself, what is it that is being stirred inside me? Where is the discomfort coming from? And this honest conversation that I have with myself is probably the most healing thing I can do for myself. Not because it will completely change me overnight, but the more aware I am of where these thought patterns are coming from, where these feeling patterns are coming from, the more the chances of being able to rewire myself. Because as we all know, as spiritual students, and I think everyone on the call is probably someone who has been studying for a while, studying meditation, studying themselves in whichever way. As we all know, the bedrock, right at the bottom of my subconscious mind, the sort of the foundation of every soul is goodness, is love, is peace, is happiness. That is a reality for all of us. On top of that bedrock, we have layers and layers and layers and layers of built up subconscious mind. And I'm sure you've all seen an iceberg, or not actually seen in real life, but you have all seen a picture of an iceberg. The iceberg has 10% on the top, 90% buried below. And may I say, quite honestly, that is what the inside of my mind looks like. 10% of my mind is my active conscious mind. That's all I know about myself, really, 10%. The rest is buried deep down inside. The rest is my subconscious mind with all of the memories and experiences that I've had over this particular life. And if you believe in past lives, then stuff that I've brought with me as well. And all of that is playing out. All of that is constantly interacting with my conscious mind. But the tricky part is I don't know. I don't know which parts are being activated unless I study, unless I take time to look within, unless I take time to reflect. And in that reflection, in that ability to go inside and just be with myself and say, hang on, where did that come from? I'm sure you've all had the experience of being a pressure cooker sometimes. Yeah? You know, the pressure cooker experience where something happens on the outside and suddenly, you just feel like you exploded. And when you do a post-mortem, you think, now, how on earth did that happen? Where on earth did that reaction come from? It was so unjustified. It wasn't necessary. It was way out of proportion. If you don't say it to yourself, someone will say it to you and say, hey, how did you behave like that? Well, what happened? And at that moment, you kind of think, yeah, where did that come from? And these are all the hidden deep memories inside me. The parts of me that I skimmed over in life, you know? You might have a trauma, you might have a bad experience. You know, you might have had a really bad relationship in your past, in your childhood. And somehow at that point in time, you didn't have the tools to handle it. So what did you do? You said, okay, it's over, let me move on. Nothing wrong in saying that. But in saying it's over, often we haven't sorted it out. The effect that has had inside me, the effect it has left in my subconscious, in that part of me that is quite vulnerable, the effect is still there. Even the memory of that experience might have gone, but the effect is still there. And so there is an opportunity for that effect to be triggered again and again and again. It's like it's lying latent inside. And how do things get resolved anyway inside? You know, when we say in Raj Yoga meditation or any form of meditation that we look within, we study, we examine the self. When I understand the seed of my behaviors, especially the negative ones, when I understand how these behaviors trigger reactions, trigger actions, when I understand that somewhere inside me, these memories are still playing out, and these stimuluses are coming, and they are able to re-trigger those old memories, then I have the opportunity to do something with the memory. It doesn't mean that the memory goes away. No. Healing within is not forgetting what happened. Healing is be able to look at things from a different perspective. It's giving myself a chance to be able to accept what happened, but most importantly, to accept myself at that point in my journey. Because, you know, all of us, if we had to redo parts of our life today, we would probably redo them quite differently, right? If you had to redo the way you lived your first couple of years with your husband, maybe, you know, the wisdom you have today, I mean, I've been married now for 27 years. The wisdom I had today, if I could put myself back in my early 20s and relive that part of my life, I might have done it differently. You know, the wisdom with which you handled your children when they were young. I mean, what you know today is different to what you knew 20, 30 years ago, right? So if you could have done it again with all your wisdom today, things might have been very different. But it wasn't like that. And life is not like that. So what you know today, thank God we know it, and thank God we have that experience. But I do need to go back and understand that at that point in time, everyone who was part of that scenario didn't know what they know today. Not just me, but, you know, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, my sister-in-law, people at work 20 years ago or 10 years ago, they probably were not as wise as they are today. And maybe they're not as wise even today. But what can you do? At least you have grown. At least you have your wisdom today. And therefore, you know, to be able to look back and accept what happened and accept that you could only know what you knew. You could only have done what you could have done. Nothing could have been different. But today, looking back with the eyes of wisdom, everything is different. Because you can learn from the situation, you can forgive. And in forgiving, it's not that you forget that moment, but you do forget the pain, the trauma, the difficulty that you may have taken from the situation. You forget it through understanding. It's like you replace it with understanding. Actually, all pain is caused in the soul through a lack of understanding. It's a very deep line. All pain is caused in the soul through a lack of understanding. All trauma is created. You know, any shock that came to me came through a lack of understanding. That's why the more I understand, the more I am able to actually put that understanding into my life today, into seeing the way I am, understanding my emotions the way they are today, the more I can live a life of wisdom and fulfillment. So when I have to manage emotions, it's not just managing what I see in my mind today, what I think I am like today. It is actually going deep, deep inside and having this gentle conversation and allowing myself to understand something of me that I didn't know before. Taking myself deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that iceberg, the lower levels, knowing that as I work through the layers, the most beautiful layer, the deepest layer, is of I, the pure soul. I, the soul, that actually is able to be the real me, the me that has uncovered, that has discarded all the fake layers that I created in my past. So this is really where emotional management becomes something so spiritual, not something that is just, repeating a mantra again and again and hoping that by repeating something in my mind, I can change. Temporarily, as I said before, yes, you can, but it doesn't create a long-term significant change. There is a very beautiful saying by Viktor Frankl, which I love. And it says that between stimulus and response, or between stimulus and emotion, there is a space, there is a gap. And the emotion is totally dependent on what I do with that gap. And the way I interpret that when I see real life situations is stimulus comes, usually from the outside. Sometimes it can also be just me triggering my own memory, but stimulus, say, comes from the outside. And like the arrow, it pierces something inside me. Then, before I react, before I choose my response, I have some space. We all have the option to create space, to create time, to create distance from the outer world, to be with myself, and to choose an appropriate response. And I think this inner space, this inner time, this inner distance is what in spiritual language we call detachment. It's a beautiful tool that allows me to step back from life, to take what I call the helicopter view, and to pause, to press the pause button of everything that's going on inside me. And in that moment of pause, what happens? When I pause, I allow myself the opportunity to reassess, to look at the stimulus coming, to understand the person or the situation from a place of peace and calm, not to look at them with the filter of my already triggered emotion, and then to see which emotion got triggered. Is this going to be the best way of responding? Or can I choose to use a different feeling? Can I choose to use something that might be more appropriate, more peaceful, something that will create more joy, that might create more love in the relationship? What might be more appropriate? And this stimulus to response starts to become a process of stimulus, choice, response. And it's that moment of choosing the right emotion, the right response. That is where managing emotions begins and ends. Because yes, there will be an automatic response, the automatic emotion that comes up, because that's what you did the last time you were triggered in the similar way. You know the old saying, right? If you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And that is so typically applicable to these sorts of situations. Whatever was recorded before, you will respond in the same way. It just becomes automatic. But what we want to do is to de-automate that system. We want to manage whatever we have inside to the best capacity we have to produce the best response on the outside. So what do? Press that pause button. Give yourself time. No one in the world can stop you from saying to your audience, whoever it might be, your children, your work colleagues, a friend, no one can stop you from saying, just give me a little bit of time. Can I try and understand this a bit better? I'll come back to you in a little while. Because when I come back to you, I'll come back to you with a me that is prepared, not a me that is just being triggered and is in pressure cooker mode. So if I want to manage my emotions long term, not only does it mean that I'm meditating and learning to hold that pause button, but it also means every time I feel like I reacted a little bit out of place, I do actually take the time to reassess and ask myself, why did I not press the pause button? Was I not prepared? And yes, many situations do come to us very suddenly, and you go, hang on, I just didn't expect that to happen to me today. I'd prepared for 10 other things, but not that. Or was it that it's an old memory that creates a very strong emotion in me? No matter how prepared I am, it's very hard to press the pause button, which just means I need a little bit more inner work in unpacking that memory and perhaps understanding it again from a different perspective. Or is it that I did give myself a bit of a pause? I did understand what was going on, but I didn't know that there could be a different response. And that's where sometimes talking to friends and talking to people who we might admire and think, oh, this person just always seems to have it together in this situation. And just to talk to them and get some tips on what other options, what other ways could there be in handling my own inner self, but also handling that typical trigger that comes. So depending on what exactly happened and what you discovered about yourself, you can then manage yourself in a very different way. Okay, so I've been speaking for about half an hour. I just want to take a little pause there, give my vocal cords a rest, not my emotions a rest, and ask you, do you have any questions? Because I somehow feel that your questions will be very valid things to this talk and might bring us to a very real life situation. So I'm checking the chat box in case anyone sends questions. But otherwise, are there any questions that you'd like to ask at this point in time before I take on another little subject?
There are a few questions, sister, that has been sent to me.
Sure.
I'll just read it out to you.
Wonderful.
Emotion is a strong feeling, but what is the key difference between emotion and feeling?
Usually in our spiritual practice, again, it all comes back down to semantics, but in our spiritual practice, I would say that a feeling comes from the base goodness that I am born with as a soul. So love, peace, happiness, purity, wisdom, or purity, silence. These are considered to be the 5 basic qualities of the human soul, of the inner being. Any feeling that arises from them would be something that we call positive response. Emotion often is something that has been built onto that, and that stems from what in Raj Yoga meditation we call body consciousness, or if you want to use a very simple word, when I disassociate from those five basic core feelings of the soul, and I come into a place of weakness. And so when I'm in a state of weakness, when I'm not the real me, then the emotion that gets triggered, which will have some percentage of negativity in it. And when I say negativity, it doesn't have to be a hugely negative feeling, but it could be fear. It could be a bit of insecurity. It could be a little bit of jealousy. It could be a little bit of self-doubt. When all of these start to get mixed with my pure self, they form an emotion. And that emotion then, obviously, as I go on in life and I keep using it, starts to become more and more firm within me. Yeah. So feeling is based on something positive. Emotion would definitely be based on something negative, a little bit of body consciousness mixed in.
We have another question here. When
Yeah.
someone is very angry towards you, in that moment, how do you remember to think you have a choice not to take it personally? There's another question which is very similar, which I just will read it out to you so that maybe you can incorporate the answer. What can I do when I'm really angry at someone but can't immediately leave the situation?
Mhm.
So,
You
two
know,
sides. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely two sides. And one is the trigger coming in as anger, and one is my response as anger. And may I probably assume that the person who's getting angry at the trigger um, probably has a trigger that has some anger in it anyway. And the person who's saying the person's getting angry with me would probably end up reacting with anger, possibly, if I didn't bother to do a little bit of self checking. You know, I grew up, and in my life as a child, there were a few angry people that I remember. And so dealing with anger was a difficult thing for me, even in my 20s. If somebody got angry with me, I would just freeze. It was like I would go into this shock mode. It was really difficult for me to handle it. And then what would happen is, as time went on, I got a little bit of confidence, especially by my mid 20s. And I realized, oh, I can reply back. I can get angry too. So I went into a different way of reacting, which was, you get angry with me, I'll get angry with you. None of them are obviously right. Yeah. And none of them are going to create a very nice outcome. But what I did realize then when I went into my 30s was that the world is full of people who are completely out of control. And anger seems to be one of the emotions that we resort to when we're out of control and feeling very insecure. I don't have enough calm and peace inside me to handle the situation. And I need to take control, maybe because I have the ego of being a mother or a father, or I have the ego of being a boss at work and you should be listening to me. And so the way to take control of the situation is to raise my voice and get angry. So that's what happens when someone gets angry. So whether it's the person getting angry with you or it's your response, you're basically trying to take control of the situation. You might be somewhere inside trying to say, listen to me, I'm right. You might be trying to say, listen to me, I am, and then a label. I'm your mum, so you'd better listen to me. You might be saying, listen to me because you don't know anything. So in all the scenarios, it is ego behind the anger. And behind that ego, there is some kind of memory of, I don't want to lose this battle. I need to prove myself to be right. So all of these are the layers, you see, that have been created inside. But I think what matters is how I handle it. So that could trigger either a freeze impact in you, or let me get angry back impact in you. And when I started to realize that anyone who's angry, whether me or the other person, is just acting out of a habit. It is just a habit. And for most people, it is a habit that is being acted out, played out in ignorance. They don't even know they're angry. In that moment, I don't have to respond. I'm dealing with a tantrum. Anger is basically a tantrum. It's a childlike behavior. What would you do today if I brought a toddler in front of you and the toddler says, I want, an ice cream or something, and they can't have it, and they throw themselves on the floor and they yell and they scream? Probably, if you're my age, I'm assuming that you're, a little bit more experienced in life than 22, you'd look at the little child and think, right, here we go again. Let's handle this one. And internally, you probably wouldn't get too flustered because it's a little thing, a tiny little baby. He has to be handled. And you know that you're much wiser and much more experienced. And he's not going to get the ice cream, but we just have to distract him. And we have to just give it some space and time for him to calm down, and things will be okay and he'll forget. So I started to handle angry people as toddlers, as people having tantrums. And it put me in a position of wisdom, of strength. I realized I'm the mom, this is the child. And to be really honest with you, anyone in any emotional state is having a tantrum. They're just out of control. They're trying to prove a point, and whether they're using anger, whether they're using their ego, whether they're using a guilt trip on you, they may not be angry, but then they start to point, you, whether they're using, all these little tactics. All they're trying to say is, I don't know how to handle the situation. I'm out of control. This is all I can do. Tantrum. So the first thing to realize when someone is getting angry with you is they're having a tantrum because they don't know what to do. Recognize their ignorance and then step up into a place of wisdom. How do you handle this toddler? Can you distract them with something else? Can you just create space and time for them? Can you press their pause button? Because if they get a little pause from their emotion, they'll start to see some sense. If it's you who's reacting already and you can feel yourself getting angry, then usually it means that you haven't given yourself that space. The trigger came and you've kind of resorted to anger because you need to prove a point. So in that moment, it's probably a good idea to, the minute you recognize the anger is flaring up, be quiet, be still. Give yourself a little bit of space. The minute you feel the anger rising, it's all you need to do is don't step away from the situation, but step in here and tell the world around you, okay, maybe I need a few minutes to think about this. Let me come back to you. I hope that answers your question. Because you need to let the emotion calm down and you need to let your feeling of peace rise up. For that, you need space and time. You need to be with you. You need to realize that you don't want to have a tantrum. Or if you've had a tantrum, then you need to just slow down internally and pick up with your own choice the emotion of peace or the emotion of love. I hope that helps both those people.
Yes, that's a good answer. We have another one which is connected again. How do I cope with being easily offended because I am too sensitive?
Yeah. So once again, sensitivity is something that is built up over our life, isn't it? The child learns sensitivity usually when the child's self-respect is low. Why do I become sensitive? When I believe what you say is true. So if you tell me I'm stupid and I believe it, I feel bad. If you told me I was stupid and internally I know that I'm not stupid, I could have a shield. And that shield is what we call self-respect. It doesn't mean that I don't hear your words, but I recognize that the words are coming out of your mouth. They're not to do with me. So sensitivity is nothing to do with the other person. Sensitivity is definitely an issue of that I need to deal with in myself. And all I need to do is to build up my own self-worth, my self-respect, my belief in myself that I'm okay, no matter how many mistakes I've made in my life, no matter what's happened, no matter when I see all my rubbish, I see my defects, even that's okay. And then when people start to say things that might have affected you, you realize this is not to do with me. Who said those words? It's to do with them. It's their opinion. It's their way of speaking or reacting. It's their lack of manners that they can speak in this way. Yeah? And then you realize this has nothing to do with me.
The next question is, how would I know if I am overreacting to a certain emotion or a situation?
I think in the weeks and days to come after an event, we all have a residue inside us. Is that residue okay? Are you feeling, you have to be very honest with yourself. But you really need to ask yourself, is that residue telling you that you're at peace? That there was love in what happened? And if not, then to be really honest and go, okay, what could I have done differently? If I'm left with the residue of, I could have acted better, I could have said something better, then I would say that there was probably a little bit of an overreaction. Maybe not a lot, but when I say overreaction, it just means I've chosen the wrong emotion. Or the emotion just got chosen because the trigger was so quick and I didn't have time for that pause button. So, often it's the moments after the event that will tell you or give you feedback into how you acted or reacted or overreacted. But I think the key word here is honesty, not justifying what happened, but just saying, okay, it could have been done slightly better. There was another way. And then working out what that other way could have been.
Okay. Our next question is, how can I support a child or a young person who is experiencing domestic violence?
It's a difficult one because any form of physical violence, different countries have different laws that deal with this. Certainly it shouldn't continue. No form of physical violence should continue, whether it's to do with domestic violence or violence on the streets or violence at work. Any form of this kind of somebody is physically being beaten is, in my mind, unacceptable behavior. But what happens in a violent situation is that one person inflicts the violence, the other person has put themselves in a position where they accept it. It's a bit unfortunate to say that, and maybe I'm being too general because I'm generalizing here. I don't know the exact situation. And yes, there are some situations where mothers specifically are being beaten or a child is being beaten. And it's very hard for them to get out of that. But ultimately, whenever there is a violent situation, the perpetrator starts and the victim kind of allows it to continue. And there could be many reasons for that. It could be just an emotional lack of self-respect. So you think it's okay to be beaten. There could be financial reasons if there's nowhere else you could go, etc., etc. I think building up the strength in the victim to say this is not acceptable, and then finding a route out. They've got to get out of the situation. They've got to have the courage to pack their bags and move out if they don't have the strength or there is no way that they can stay in the situation and stop the perpetrator. Sometimes people who are violent, if you just stop them in their tracks and say, look, I'm not accepting this anymore. You do it one more time, I'll call the police. It's over. Sometimes that's not possible. The child doesn't have the courage to do that. So they need to be physically taken out of the situation and put somewhere where they are safe and a healing process can begin. So I'm not sure, because if I don't know the exact situation, it's hard for me to say. But just supporting them and saying it will be okay, one day it will end, no. If it's physical violence, I think they need to be taken out of the situation, or they need to have the courage to get themselves out of what's going on. That's my opinion anyway.
Thank you. So, what I have taken myself personally from today's session is we are not our emotions. I think this is what we need to, first of all, make it very firm and very clear. And that emotions are, by their nature, very strong. However, it's important to get clear that we are not our emotions. As a person, we are with a person with values and commitments who happens to have emotions and who are triggered on a regular and ongoing basis. When we fail to have this understanding that we are not our emotions, and we think that we and our emotions are one, what happens is that we are effectively hijacked by them.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to add something, sister?
Yeah, I would say that definitely, of course, you're not the emotion. The emotion is just a layer that is built up on you. You, the beautiful, pure inner light, the soul, as we say. And the hijacking process just means that it's become autopilot. You know, so many of our reactions are, our emotions. Today we recognize them as being emotions. 3, 4 years ago, you might have just thought, oh, but that's normal, and you just would have justified it. And so the hijack is actually ignorance. When I'm not aware of what is going on, I'm being hijacked. The minute I have the realization, oops, I got a bit emotional there, the hijacking process is started to end, because I'm aware. Self-awareness is probably the key to any form of inner change, inner management. The minute I'm aware that this emotion is taking me away from my truth, from the way I want to be, from the bedrock of goodness that I have inside me, then I can stop that hijacking process. The hijacker are all these emotions that have built up the layers, and I have to put my hand out and say, no, you're not allowed to take over. I'm creating space. I'm creating the choice of which path I walk and how I respond in life.
Thank you. Maybe what you could guide us to a few minutes of meditation, so that when we are facing a certain emotion or an emotion that is being triggered within us, how do we handle that? And how, like you said, that use the pause button, if you could guide us.
Absolutely, I'd love to do that. And I'll just finish with a little story. You probably know the story. A lot of people know it, but I tell it in my own way. So there was this wise Buddhist monk walking with his little apprentice down a busy street in Bangkok. I'm sure Bangkok is just as busy as Jakarta. And, one of those main streets where you have people and cars and, three-wheelers and two-wheelers and whatnot. And they saw this beautiful girl. She was blind, but very pretty. She wanted to cross the road and she couldn't, because every time she stepped off the sidewalk, the traffic was so much, she had to step back. So the elderly monk went and picked her up and walked across the road and dropped her to the other side. And he came back and they continued on their walk. Now, this totally went against their rules. The rules of the monastery were, you don't go anywhere near a woman, you don't look at a woman, forget about picking up a woman. So this was a huge mistake that he made in the eyes of, his little friend, his little apprentice. And the apprentice remembered that. And every time he would look at the monk, his vision had changed. It was like, oh, you cheat. And every time he interacted with the monk, inside there was this little bit of a feeling of, oh, you're not a nice person. And at the end of the year, he had kept this in his mind, and his thoughts, his feelings, everything had changed towards the elderly monk. And so at the end of the year, he goes to his master and he said, I'm really sorry, master, but I quit. I'm actually not going to become a monk anymore. And the wise old monk said, why? And he said, remember that day when we went for a walk down the street, busy street in Bangkok, and you picked up that girl, and then you hid it from everyone, and you cheated on us, and you did something so wrong, and he had held it right deep down inside. It had affected so many layers of his life. His vision, his attitude, his thoughts, everything had been affected. It was like he got infected by that memory, and the virus was growing inside him. And so the wise old monk was so clever. He looked at him and he said, I did pick her up and I did carry her across the road, but I dropped her on the other side of the road. Whereas what you did is you carried her in your subconscious mind and in your conscious mind for the past 1 year. And I think, moral of the story is how much stuff we're carrying of the past that are creating it's like a rubbish bin, isn't it? Just festering away inside. And therefore, every time a trigger comes, it goes through the filter of all this rubbish and then creates a reaction. How important it is to clean ourselves, to manage the inside, to let go of rubbish, to restore goodness on a daily basis. That's the only way I can manage to keep myself clean and emotion free, and here negativity free. And if I don't do that cleaning regularly, obviously the residue that's there is just going to get more and more and more. Okay, so now some time for meditation. So find a comfortable position for your body and just relax on the chair. Allow yourself to be very easy and just do a quick body scan from your feet upwards, relaxing every muscle. So relax your feet, relax your legs, your back, your stomach muscles. Even relax your breathing. Just feel the weight of your body on the chair as you relax your shoulders, your arms, your hands. And bringing all your attention and awareness to I, the living light within, the soul. And as I turn my attention inwards, I see that iceberg within me. I see my mind full of thoughts, the thoughts that create day-to-day emotions. And beneath them, I see all the layers. The layers of all the memories I still hold, the experiences I still have that haven't been sorted out. And I dive deeper within myself. until I come to a place of very deep calm, of stillness. And here, in this inner space, deep within my spirit, at the core of my being, there is a place of peace where no emotion can bother me. A place where I can see things clearly, honestly. A place from where I can respond in a peaceful way, where I could choose how I wish to respond. Whenever I come to this place, I strengthen my ability to press the pause button, to come to peace, to come to tranquility and clarity before I respond to life. This reconnection creates a new habit in me. The habit of choice, that I can choose my response. Now gently take a deep breath in, let it out again, and another deep breath in, let it out again as you reconnect with your body and with your surroundings. Just remember, whatever happens on the inside is my responsibility. Every emotion can be transformed into a beautiful feeling. I just need to create the space. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. I think we need the practice now to revisit that place ever so often and to remind ourselves to use that pause button. Also, what you said today was very nice, that between the stimulus and the response, we need to create that choice. And it is we who need to create that choice, because that is a choice that we have to take as well. So thank you very much for today's session. And I'm sure everybody here must have taken a lot from today's session. We have Diwali coming up next week. So yeah, this is a good time to do a lot of cleaning up from within. So thank you, Sister Sona, once again.
Thank you all. Lovely to be with you in Jakarta.
Yes, wonderful to have you with us. And if any of you would like, or all of you would like to put on your video and thank Sister Sona, would be nice for her to see all of you.
Such a lovely group that you have there.
Yeah, so we have a gathering of people from all over the world, what I see here today.
Fantastic. So special. And if anyone ever wants to contact me with questions, Jabeen, they know that they can always go back to you, and very happy to help.
Yes, would do that. So thank you once again for joining us. Our next session will be on the 21st of November because next week is Diwali. So here's wishing all of you who celebrate Diwali a very happy Diwali in advance. Have a nice weekend and do drop me a message so that I can update you for the upcoming sessions. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.